Okay, so very good. We're joined by Matt Cutair, and Matt, uh, we're very excited. We've been with this filly. We've been fortunate with the club the last few years. This is our fourth season. We've seen everything. We keep saying we've seen everything in this sport, and I think the members that are online right now, they can vouch for this. We've really just about seen everything with this club. But the filly's been, she's been a lot of fun. We did have like a stop with her early on. She ran once in Saratoga, and then she was put away for the rest of the season. She came back. But tell me a little bit about your introduction to Community Adjusted and Adelphi, and also maybe we can even in a second we'll go back to Adelphi and just you can give us some background on that too.
Sure, sure. Well, with Community, I've known Rob Massiello for the last several years. We've used the same bloodstock advisor, Joe Migliori, who maybe some of you guys know, and we got introduced. And so I've been following kind of Rob's horses at least for the last 3 or 4 years. And actually remember when Community debuted at Saratoga, I thought it was a pretty good race. I thought the race came up really tough, and I thought for first time effort, she ran pretty well. And kind of followed her casually since then. Just kind of as a fan, because I'm friends with Rob and I've owned a couple horses with them and things like that. And so watched her last year. I thought she was really impressive when she broke her maiden, going a little bit further, and she was a little bit closer to the pace that day. And she just seemed like a filly that, when she was able to get sort of into the race early on, she had a good chance to out finish, a lot of the other fillies in the field. So I thought that was impressive. And then I happened to be at the Kentucky Derby this year, so I watched her run in person there. And I thought she had a really bad trip that day. Kind of was further back than maybe she would want to be, and needed to kind of go inside, and then, the hole shut off inside, and I had to take her outside. She almost made kind of two moves. And even though I didn't think she had like a huge turn of foot, like some of these turf horses do, I thought, she actually made a pretty good move first off the bench. So I thought it was a pretty good effort, in that spot. And then, when I found out that the filly was potentially for sale, kind of looked back and saw that the winner of that race came back to win quite impressively. I think at Belmont. It would have been at Belmont in the second level allowance, and the form of the race seemed to be pretty good. And just kind of thought that she was a filly that, based on pedigree and what I had seen, would kind of get better as she got older. As a 4-year-old and maybe even next year into a 5-year-old season. And so when the opportunity presented itself to buy her, my partners and I were really interested in it. We were able to work out a deal with Rob and get involved. Obviously, like you said, I've owned horses for a while, and I've seen everything in this game. First horse I ever owned in a partnership finished last by like 50 lengths. First horse I ever owned by myself that I claimed won by 4 first off the claim. And I've seen everything in between. So you don't typically get to buy into a horse and then run basically a week and a half, 2 weeks later and get a win, especially that level of race. So I guess you guys are my good luck charm. We'll have to own every horse together from here on out. If we're going to bat 1,000. So excited to be involved. It was great to meet a lot of you guys. Obviously it's hard to see everybody on the screen, but I met some of you guys at Belmont for the race, and had a nice chance to have a drink afterwards and celebrate. And that was a lot of fun. And there's worse things in the world than pointing to a race in Saratoga on the weekend next out. It's obviously going to be a tougher spot, but should be a fun day. So I'm excited about it.
Matt, can you tell us a little bit about Adelphi? Tell us just basically tell us, when did you start Adelphi? Like, just people that are involved in it. Just give us basically a background of the club.
Yeah, so I've owned horses for like the last 18, 19 years, and I started in syndicate or partnerships. I owned horses with a syndicate called Sovereign Stables, which isn't around anymore, but it was started by Matt Gatsis, and they actually still race horses under their own name, Gatsis Thoroughbreds. They had Vacoma and a couple of other nice horses, and it was kind of my introduction to owning horses in general. And I was in a partnership, and I've owned horses with like Little Red Feather and Zilla and a bunch of other partnerships over the years. And then about 5, 6 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be in a situation to be able to buy my own horses. And, I started by buying a couple horses at auction and claiming a few horses on the NYRA circuit. And I was with Ray Handel, who's a trainer I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of in New York. And he said, "Hey, I've got 2 other guys who own horses with small groups, and I think you guys would all get along, and maybe you can buy some horses together." And those 2 guys were Brian Hahn, who runs a smaller partnership named Dark Horse Racing, and Jordan Zotz, who had a group of like 4 or 5 guys that ran under Randall Manor Racing. And Ray connected us. We all got along really well, and we ended up buying and claiming probably a couple dozen horses over the last several years together. And I quickly kind of learned that even though I was able to buy horses myself, I like the partnership experience. I liked owning horses with other people and the camaraderie of it, and just being able to text back and forth about what was going on with our horses and next spots and things like that. And just really got to know those guys and like those guys. And we talked about basically back at the end of 2019, we thought about trying to start a smaller, more boutique partnership that kind of blended the benefits of what we were doing and on our own, and then the benefits of sort of partnership type owning experiences. And so we started Adelphi at the end of 2019. We bought a couple of horses, and as luck would have it, we actually went to run our first horse under the first Adelphi partnership the day that Aqueduct closed to fans due to COVID in March of 2020. And that was a surreal day to go there and watch the horse race when nobody else was there. And, it was quite interesting. And he ran really good that day, finished second. And, but very quickly thereafter, obviously they shut down racing. And then when they brought it back for Saratoga in the summer, there were no fans. And, our original plan was to kind of, buy a bunch of horses under the Adelphi name. I own a good percentage of every horse we buy, and we get partners involved, and Brian and Jordan and their group own percentages. And, we just kind of pool our resources and try to, we wanted to buy a lot more horses because we were having a lot of fun with it, but it just didn't seem like the right time to kind of do that when people couldn't go out and see their horses in the morning and couldn't go out to watch racing in the afternoon. So kind of just pumped the brakes, ran the first partnership out through Saratoga of last year. Had a good amount of success with it. We won, several races, won 3 races up at Saratoga. We actually shipped a horse who was a grass horse out to Santa Anita for the winter, and won a race out there, and took advantage of their ship and win. So it was like a fun partnership from the perspective of the horses did well, and we all had a good time with it, but it was obviously during a crazy time with COVID. And so last year, once, sort of Saratoga reopened to fans and, people were back and hanging out, we thought it would be a good time to kind of, push on Adelphi and try to bring in more people. And so we started to market it in the fall of last year. We bought a bunch of yearlings. We've, claimed and bought horses privately, like community adjusted. And we have about 45 members now in the partnership. The goal is probably get somewhere in like the 75 to 100 range. We don't want to, not that there's anything wrong with it, but we don't want to be like as big as like a West Point or those kind of really, really large partnerships, because it's hard to, the goal with us is for it to really feel like, everybody kind of knows everybody, everybody's, chatting, talking back and forth. Like, it's more of a club, but that's why we call it the Adelphi Racing Club. Even though it's obviously a little bit different than what you guys are doing. That's kind of what we're doing. And, you'll see, if you watch Saratoga, you'll see some new ads for us on the NYRA show. We promoted ourselves there last fall and had a good amount of success with it. And, hopefully we have a good summer.
Mm-hmm. Now so who selects your horses? Because now, did you claim horses in the beginning and then you guys kind of moved on into buying yearlings and that kind of thing? Or were you always from the beginning mixing, and who buys them for you? Basically, who selects them?
Yeah, so we've always done both. Our approach, is to be about as diversified as possible in terms of what we buy, and then also to be very it's a hard thing to say with a straight face in this game, but to be as fiscally responsible as we can be, as it relates to buying racehorses. The way we kind of look at it is like we want to spend enough money on the horses that we buy at auction or the horses that we claim to be competitive at the highest levels. But at the end of the day, there's a point when you're at an auction that, when you're bidding on a horse at $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, you're bidding against people that, the amount of money that they're spending on that horse doesn't really matter. It's just, do they want the horse or not? They can pay really whatever they want. And so, we try to buy horses at auction in the, 50 to 200,000 range. And then when we claim horses, we're not claiming at the bottom because, we want a horse to have an opportunity to go up in class, maybe out of the claiming ranks, or at least have, an opportunity to drop the horse down and have them be competitive at a lower level if, they don't go the way we want them to go. And, when you claim at the bottom level, you really have nowhere to go sometimes. So we try to kind of be strategic like that when we buy, and we buy, we really do a mix of auction, claims, private purchases. We're looking at a couple of horses at the July Horses of Racing Age sale as well, like those kinds of places. That's kind of our approach. From a picking out of the horses perspective, we primarily use Joe Migliori and his bloodstock agency. And then we've used Oracle Bloodstock, which is Connor Foley out of Kentucky as well. So those are kind of our two primary sourcers of horses.
Okay, and trainers, who are the because I know you obviously have, you mentioned Ray Handel, you also have Christophe Clement, obviously, but who else do you guys have horses with?
Yeah, so Christophe and Ray, I would say, are our two primary trainers. I have a horse running tomorrow that George Abreu trains. Brian, my partner that I mentioned before, has used George and a couple of other horses, so he's definitely someone we like to use as well. We used Rob Falcone when we shipped that horse out to California, and would look to get another horse with Rob. We use Toby Sheets, who's Steve Asmussen's assistant in New York. The horses run under Steve's name, but Toby trains them in New York. Those are kind of the primary guys. We've tried to get a horse with Tom Morley for like the last 3 or 4 months, and we've lost a bunch of claim shakes. But we're still efforting to do that. I like Tom a lot. I think he's had a really good last couple of years, especially claiming horses, older horses with class and stepping them up. So, we try to use a variety of guys, but if we're pretty top weighted to Christophe and Ray, and most of our younger horses will go to Christophe and Ray. And that was one of the good things, obviously, about Community, is that, we're already using Christophe. So it was very easy to buy the horse and just
transition. Yeah.
Keep her in her same stall. And they had done a good job with her, obviously, and, have every faith that they'll continue to do a good job with her. So that was, fortuitous from that standpoint.
And if anybody has a question for Matt, just feel free to put up the hands up. I keep flipping if you see me looking off to the side, because I can't see everybody all at once, so I keep flipping between screens. So if anybody wants to ask Matt a question, just put your hand up, and then, or you put up that little icon there with the hand up icon, and then I'll come to you as soon as possible. Matt, so I had another question I had, just because you mentioned that you had been with several partnerships prior to starting Adelphi. So it probably gives you a little bit of a unique perspective in that you've experienced a variety of partnerships, and now obviously you started your own, or you were one of the principals in starting a new one. What is it before you actually started Adelphi, what were you looking for? Like, what were the criteria that you wanted fulfilled in getting into, or, joining a particular club or partnership or syndicate? And how did that mold what you did with Adelphi?
Yeah. So, I think the stuff that I was like most in tune with and interested in was joining a group where like I felt like I belonged and could, meet people and, enjoy races together. Like the experience of going to the races, hanging out, before and after the races, you know, being able to kind of, you know, be friendly enough with a few other partners on a horse where you could text on the side and, you know, talk about, hey, like, you know, where are we going to run the horse next? Just like being involved in on the social aspect side of it. You know, I wanted to feel like it was a group of people that, like, you know, I could get along with. And you know, you know, I've been in partnerships where it feels very much more like I'm an investor, right? And
Mm,
like you know, I picked out a horse or two that I want to be involved with, and I own a percentage of that horse, and I write my check, and then, you know, I get kind of like, you know, I don't mean it exactly this way, but I kind of get like quarterly financial reports, right?
right.
On how the horse is doing. And then, you know, I go to the races and, you know, watch the horse run, and, you know, go to the paddock that day, watch the horse run, and then go home. Like, that wasn't really what I was looking for. I was looking for, you know, more of an experience, and being able to, you know, feel more involved, feel more like a partner than an investor. And so I kind of, you know, gravitated towards that. And, you know, I don't want to obviously talk negatively about any of the partnerships, but some of them, like, I felt more of that than others. And so that kind of informed where I would, you know, invest more of my horse capital, you know, moving forward. So that was a big part of it, to me. And then, you know, I would say one of the things that you know, I realized owning horses myself, that was a huge benefit to owning horses in a partnership, was not dealing with all of the, you know, sort of operational headache that goes into owning horses.
Mm,
You know, everything from, you know, dealing with the jockey club to, the New York State Gaming Commission, to the racetracks. When, you know, we shipped a horse to, Monmouth the other day, you know, you're running in a different state. It's a completely different, you know, government bureaucracy that you have to make sure you have all your stuff, you know, all that stuff. And then, you know, getting bills from trainers and vets and, you know, van companies and, you know, acupuncturists and all these, you know, and having to then, you know, handle the financials of that and pay the bills and code everything correctly and do all that sort of stuff. So that was one of the other things that I guess I didn't realize until I owned my own horses, was
mm,
like one of the huge benefits of being in a partnership, was just, you know, being able to enjoy, you know, the horse side of it without all of the operational and logistic, headaches that exist, you know, in this, industry. And so, you know, there are myriad of other things that kind of went into like what I liked and didn't like, or whatever. But that really did inform kind of what we're doing with Adelphi. I mean, I would say like the two biggest things that we're focused on with Adelphi are, one, and I've said it before, but like, you know, I really mean it, like making people feel like partners and not investors. That's like really important to me. Like, and, you know, we want people involved in the partnership that, you know, see the industry the same way we do and have the same values, and, you know, want to be, you know, want to experience it. You know, there's definitely a lot of people, they want to just buy into a horse, and, you know, maybe when it races they'll go and watch a race, or they just want to watch it on TV, and like they like that, that's what they get out of it, and that's what they want to get out of it, and that's great. That's like less of, you know, we're not as good of a fit for that kind of person. We want the people that, you know, want to be involved. And you know, I basically spend my days, you know, texting partners, calling partners, you know, some social, some, you know, about the horses. And like, it's just, you know, the partnership aspect of it is really important to us. And then the other thing I talked a little bit about before as well is, I'm a big believer in, you know, it's very difficult to compete at the high levels of this game, because there are owners, that, you know, own countries,
mm,
are, you know, wealthy beyond belief. And you know, if you go to the Saratoga Select Sale, you know, in the beginning of August, you'll see people paying astronomical amounts of money for horses. And, you know, I could talk to 4 or 5 bloodstock agents, and they may say that horse is actually worth 600,000 as a yearling, right? It's a lot of money. The people that are bidding at that level, they may pay 1.2 million for that horse because they want the horse and they have infinite funds. And so the other key thing for us is trying to compete at the highest levels, but doing it in a fiscally responsible way and being smart about, you know, where we allocate the money. Because you know, I've owned a lot of horses now, and, you know, a lot of things can happen. You can get lucky, you can get unlucky. I really think it's like an at bat game, an
mm,
at bat game, so to speak. Like,
mm,
the more at bats you can have, the better chance you have at owning a successful, horse. And I'm sure you guys have seen that with the horses that you've been involved with. Like some of them may have been really good and then they get hurt, or some of them may not have been so good. And then some of them are good and they stay healthy. You know, there's so many like things that can happen. And so like, it's almost a numbers game in a lot of ways. And so if my theory on that is if you buy in a fiscally responsible way, if you claim in a fiscally responsible way, if we're smart about, you know, how we place horses and what trainers we use and all that sort of stuff, you know, it gives our partners a chance not to make money, because like that's really, really hard in this game, but a chance to try to, you know, get some of the money back every time so that they can reinvest it to hopefully, you know, buy into and own a really nice horse.
Mhm.
You know, just as you kind of cycle through and you get, you know, that horse that does everything right, stays sound, has talent, maybe he's in the right division at the right time, you know, all those things
Mhm.
come together. So like, those are kind of the main things that we try to do.
Mhm. I think it's very interesting because just listening to you, it's almost like you've been part of our club for the last 4 years. Like the things you're saying resonate in terms of our experiences with the type of horses we had, with some of the situations we had, the ups, the downs. Like you know, it just to me, it underscores the fact of what we went through, even though some of the things were kind of crazy. Like it's not unique. Like in horse racing, these are the kind of things that happen. But I think one thing that I'm really zeroing in on here, because I find again you have a unique perspective and that you've experienced a lot of different things, is when you wanted to go out. Now you have gone with other clubs, other syndicates, partnerships. You've done that. You've seen what they have to offer. Some you've liked, maybe some you didn't like as much. You decide, okay, I'm going to go out on my own, or now I'm going to go do my own thing. What's the next step? What, for somebody who's in your position before you started with Adelphi, what is the next step? What do you think is a good place for somebody to start that's looking to make that transition from, okay, I've been in these partnerships and these clubs, but now I'm looking to do something a little bit more my own thing?
So my main recommendation would be to try to network with other owners and start there. You know, you definitely need to find a trainer and a bloodstock agent that you can trust and that you know, sort of understands what your goals are and you know, how you want to approach the game and can give you you know, real quality advice. But if you start with a trainer or you start with a bloodstock agent, and I don't mean this in a negative way at all, but it's just human nature. Like they have their own, you know, personal perspective, and they also have their own personal biases in terms of like what they're trying to get out of running and racing horses, which maybe doesn't align with what you know you want to do. And so, like I would say the best thing to do would be to talk to several different owners if you can. Try to network with other people who own horses themselves, not necessarily through partnerships, but people who have direct relationships with trainers through owning horses and direct relationships with bloodstock agents through owning horses. Explain to those people, you know, what your goals are, you know, how you're set up, all that sort of stuff, and ask them to make recommendations on what trainers they like, why they like them, you know, why they don't, and the same with bloodstock agents, and you know, then kind of narrow it down from there and find you know, a bloodstock agent or advisor and or a trainer that you know fits sort of what you're trying to do. Because you know, I've used probably, you know, I mentioned a bunch of them, but like I've got horses in West Virginia. I have a trainer down there. I've run horses in Texas before. I used a trainer out there. I have a trainer out in California now for a horse that we bought in Texas and shipped out to California for the Del Mar Ship and Win. So like I probably used 10 different trainers, and you know, just being honest, like a few of them I wouldn't recommend to anyone.
Mhm.
The bulk of them I would, but I might recommend one or two trainers for someone who's looking to do one thing and a completely different trainer for someone who's looking to do something else. And you know, personalities matter and all that matters. So you know, I really think the best thing to do would be to start with networking with other owners who have those direct relationships, again, with trainers or bloodstock agents, and get, you know, quality feedback, not just general quality feedback, like talk to them about what you're trying to do, because again, what you're trying to do is going to inform that feedback in a major way, because certain trainers do certain things really well and they do other things poorly, and vice versa for other people. That would be my recommendation, is kind of start there.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody have any questions as we move ahead? I don't see. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, maybe just unmute yourself and say something, because again, I'm trying really hard to keep flipping back and forth between screens to see everybody, but I'm having difficulty doing it at every moment. So if you guys want to ask anything, just unmute yourself and then maybe just say something, and we'll kind of jump over to you as well. Matt, I just, oh, hold on a second, Stephen. Yep, Stephen.
Could I ask
Yep,
a couple of simple
yes,
questions?
You're up, Stephen.
Great, thank you. Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for your time today. Just a couple quick questions. First of all, how'd you come up with the name Adelphi?
Yeah, it's funny. So I've started businesses before, and like coming up with the name is always the hardest thing. And when we started the partnership, as you could probably imagine, like we went back and forth with like dozens and dozens of names, and then you land on stuff everybody likes, and then you Google it and someone's already got it, or for whatever reason it doesn't work. And so we were just throwing a bunch of names out one day, and I think it was Jordan. It might have been Brian. It wasn't me. I can't take credit for it, but someone threw out Adelphi, and first thing I thought about with Adelphi was Saratoga and the Adelphi Hotel. I think at the time they had just remodeled it, so that was kind of in my head. I was like, okay, there's like a connection there. And then when I looked up Adelphi, it like the meaning of Adelphi is like a brotherhood. So we were talking about at the time, like one of the things that was important to us, and one of the reasons we called it the Adelphi Racing Club, was the sort of camaraderie and partnership aspect of it. So obviously we have men and women and people of all different ages in the partnership. But like the brotherhood aspect spoke to us in terms of it being like a true sort of club. So those things kind of came together, and that's how we landed on it. Most people think that either I went to Adelphi University or one of us went to Adelphi University, but
I went to Adelphi. That's why I asked.
Oh, it's funny.
I also go to the hotel, but anyway, also as the managing partner, is that now has this become like your full-time career, or do you do something else as well?
Yeah, so I was fortunate. I started a business about a decade or so ago in the advertising space, and ended up selling that business, and continue to work there for a period of time until I kind of worked through that, and now just am kind of full-time doing this. I have a couple of other businesses on the side that I've invested in and advise or sit on boards or things like that. But for me, this is kind of my full-time thing. Like this has always been my passion and what I want to do, and that's one of the other things too that I said before, we want to kind of cap the number of people we have, because like one of the things that's important to me is like me being the one that has like the direct conversations with people in terms of here's what's happening with the horses and things like that. Not that once you get to a certain size, you have to hire people that manage that sort of stuff and whatever. And this is I hesitate to use the word business really, because it's more of like a lifestyle business, if anything else. It's just, the goal here is to grow it. The goal here is to get, enough like-minded people together, pull resources, be able to buy horses, and sort of get more of those at bats that I talked about before. And I own, at least a leg, so 25%, sometimes up to like 80-90% of every horse that we have. And you'll see when we run horses, like I'll run it under Adelphi name, like I own every horse that we have. And so, it's important for me to be involved with all the horses myself in terms of owning it. And through Adelphi, we get to bring, more people into the mix, which is the goal.
And just one final comment question. So one of the things that I've learned, or I've been told, is for a small-time guy that wants to get involved, it might be better to try and invest in, a small amount in a few horses, because you're spreading your risk around instead of having 25% or something in one horse. Is there a minimum percentage that you need to own of a horse to be afforded all the ownership advantages, access to the barn area and the paddock, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, so
I'm s-
in New York, you have to own 3% of at least one horse to technically qualify to then register with the New York State Gaming Commission, get your license with them, and then obviously get your NYRA credentials after you've been approved by the Gaming Commission, and that gets you the same pass that Mike Rapoli has, right? Like in terms of the credentials. So it's 3% of one horse. You don't have to own 3% of every horse though. So like, we have some partners that maybe they own 3 horses with us and they bought 2% of 2 horses and 3% of one. That qualifies. You can own really any percentage that you want. But the Gaming Commission rule is 3% of at least one horse.
and would that be my responsibility to get, because I actually started that process at like, I
Well, I
don't know, a
said
year.
the combo with a Coke. Yeah, that's a combo, but does not include a drink.
I'm sorry, could somebody mute?
Yeah, I
Yes.
mute. Yeah, I think somebody accidentally unmuted. Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Yeah, so does the whoever's running that syndicate or partnership, would they typically take care of that for me? Or do I apply to NYRA and the Gaming Commission myself?
Yeah, so we can't take care of it for you because the process. So let me back up. We help many of our partners get registered. We can't actually physically take care of it for you because there's forms that you have to fill out with your information, right, that we may not know. Then there's also fingerprinting that you have to do. They send the fingerprints in to do the background check, because it's a gambling, New York State Gaming Commission thing. Like they're gonna, look into your background to prove you as someone who could own horses. Yeah. So you obviously, we can't take the fingerprints for you and things like that. But it's a very easy process. So that there's forms online. Typically what we do with partners when we help them is we send them the forms online, they fill it out, they'll give me a call, we'll go through the forms, make sure that they're filled out correctly. And then I'll say, hey, meet me at Belmont, on Saturday. And go to Belmont on Saturday. And between races 2 and 3, I'll walk them down to the New York State Gaming Commission office right there on site. They can actually fingerprint you on site. You come with a check for the amount that you're going to owe. You come with your completed forms, you give it to them. They ask you a couple questions. They fingerprint you. They give you your temporary license while they're submitting everything to be reviewed. You take that temporary license over to Lou Cobell, who runs credentialing for NYRA. He gives you your NYRA badge. And I say 9 times out of 10, between like, if we went down after race 2, between race 2 and 3, like it takes about that amount of time for that whole process to go through, and you have your badge, going into the 3rd or 4th race. So it's a really easy process. You got to do some stuff in advance, fill out the form and make, all that sort of stuff to make it go quicker. But doing it at the track is super easy, whether it's Aqueduct or Belmont or Saratoga. There is an option also to mail it in. When you do that, you obviously have to go to a police station or wherever to get your fingerprints, and you got to do, some other stuff. You got to send in a couple of passport photos because they're not going to take your picture like they do at the office, things like that. But you can mail it into the main Gaming Commission office in Schenectady and, do it that way too. So you've got options, but the easiest thing usually is just to, fill everything out in advance. We obviously help, cause sometimes the questions are confusing or whatever, help to fill out the right way. And then, either the partner will go themselves or, I'll meet them at the track and we'll walk to the Gaming Commission and they'll do their thing. And it takes, 30 minutes and they're through everything and they have their badge.
Okay, one final question. Are you accepting new owners into your partnership? Any realistic one of you?
We are, for sure. We don't have any horses right now that are open and available. As you can probably imagine, this time of year is a bit quiet for a lot of partnerships because the 2-year-old sales just happened and those horses, have been syndicated and are partnered out. The yearling sales are going to start actually next week in Kentucky, but then obviously into Saratoga in August. So the yearlings haven't been purchased yet to then be partnered out. And the way we do it with our private purchase and claiming partnerships, like the one we have community adjusted through, is we raise that money usually late spring and then it gets spent throughout the year. But we'll have, we actually just opportunistically bought into a 2-year-old like last week and then he ran over the weekend. So like that sort of stuff will pop up. So we're definitely accepting new members. We just don't have any like inventory, so to speak, right now. But if you have an interest, be great to maybe meet up in Saratoga if you're out there or whatever. And once we have something that's available, obviously happy to let you look at it. If you're interested.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Good luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. So what kind of horses do you guys typically look for? You said you touched on it a little bit earlier, but like what is it? Do you have like a certain number? We want a certain number of 2-year-olds, a certain number of claiming horses. We want a certain number of, or is it more like whatever comes up?
I would say so. We definitely try to diversify what we have, right? Because different people like different kinds of horses, right? So we have some partners who they're interested in taking a couple of swings every year at like that colt that could be that big horse that maybe runs on the Kentucky Derby trail, right? And that's really hard to buy for, but like that's what some people want to get out of the game. And so we're not going to go out and buy $1 million horse to do that, right? We're going to do it in our way, but we are going to try to have a horse or two every year that kind of checks that box so that people have that option if that's what they want to do. We do though really think about like beyond how much we pay for the horse, we think about other things that I would put under the fiscal responsibility umbrella. So we try to buy as many New York breds as we possibly can, right? Like they're not all New York breds, but we try to have as many New York breds as we possibly can because there's such an advantage in owning horses in New York if they're New York bred, running for, in restricted races. There's about 1,100 New York breds every year. There's about 18 to 20,000 overall thoroughbreds born every year. Stands to reason if you're running against 1,100 competition instead of 18 to 20,000, like it's going to be easier typically. You're also running in restricted races and conditions that you can like double up on if the horse is good enough. So if you go through your New York bred conditions, you can still then run through all your open company conditions. And the purses for the New York bred races are really good. So like we'll definitely focus on things like that. We also try to have as many fillies as we possibly can because at the end of the day, more female horses are going to be worth something at the end of their racing career than male horses by a long, by a lot. Just because, if you're going to have a foal, you need a mare to have a foal. One stallion could cover 150 mares. So far more of the fillies and mares are going to be worth money, at the end of their career. And so, we try to make sure we have enough fillies to so that, hopefully they have a successful racing career, and then we can, we can make some money on the back end once they're done racing through breeding them or selling them, in a broodmare sale. Actually, a good example. So like looking at community adjusted, Rob was going to sell a couple horses, and so we looked at all the horses that he was going to sell, and he had another horse that had just won a first level allowance race, and she was older. She was 5, and actually, I think community adjusted has a pretty good pedigree, but this filly had a bit more pedigree. And so she was, she had run I think like at the time, like an 88 buyer speed figure, something like that. So slightly older, had run through a condition that community adjusted hadn't run through, and at the time had more residual value from a broodmare perspective. So, and we liked her too. She actually kind of kicked myself because she came back and she won another race for Rob after we didn't make an offer to buy her. But like we were looking at that horse and this horse, and we really gravitated towards community adjusted because we thought that for the price that we would pay for her, that there was more opportunity to do well, and that there was a bit more upside longer term, with her. So like we do kind of like weigh things that way. And I also thought, and I think it'll be proven out when this filly sells in the sale, there was going to be more competition from California buyers for this other horse because of her running style and the ship and win to California and things like that. So like we try, even in this example, like we gravitated towards the filly that we thought was the better value, even though we liked both horses, because I think over the long term that'll pay off. It doesn't always, but it'll pay off, over a larger sample size.
Well, it doesn't look like a bad investment because she won. You had her and she won, and
Yeah.
she won immediately. Like, I mean, except for obviously the hiccup of, the horses getting scratched for the first, her first race that she was entered for you, but she made up for it.
Yeah, which that, it's funny, like in this game, anything can happen, good and bad. And like, obviously at the time, that was about as bad as it could get. You buy into a horse, you get all excited, you're going to run right away. And then, some fluke situation pops up where a vet forgets to administer Lasix to half the field, and, it scratches into a match race and you don't get to run. And those are the bad breaks in horse racing. But in retrospect, it probably turned out in our favor because they wrote the race back. It was a smaller field. We didn't have to run against the Chad or the Shug horse. And, she was able to be, more forwardly placed in a smaller field. She got a great trip, so like what looked like an unlucky break actually ended up being a really lucky break, which is, that's kind of horse racing in a nutshell. At least that's what I've experienced.
Right. Definitely. Definitely. I don't know if does anybody want to add anything there? Hold on a second. I'm just looking. I don't see anybody saying anything. Before we let you go, Matt, I have one more question for you. If you could just give us, you kind of alluded to it earlier, but if you could just tell us what's the plan short term with community adjusted, and maybe what are you guys thinking about maybe a few months down the road?
Yeah, so I think you guys probably saw that the Clements entered her into a race last weekend. I think the thought process there was, minimal chance we would run there, but sometimes at the end of Belmont you can find softer races because people choose not to enter the horses there because they want to wait to run them in Saratoga. So sometimes in these types of conditions, there'll be shorter fields and maybe even shorter fields with slightly lower competition for the level. And she was doing really well out of the race. And so I think they thought, let's give it a shot, see if we can catch a short, lower quality field and try to, steal a race, so to speak. And so they entered her and it ended up being actually the opposite. It was like a larger field and pretty good competition. So it was a pretty easy decision on their part, I think, to say, hey, let's scratch and wait to run in like the spot that made the most sense from the beginning in terms of the spacing out of the last race and whatnot. And so they had targeted that race on the 31st at Saratoga, the second level allowance race, so just the condition above the one that she just won. And one of the good things, this is a little bit, kind of minutia, but when you're entering a horse in a race, every horse has a scratch date, and that's how you get preference to be able to run if more than the number of horses that are allowed to run in a race enter in a race. And so if you have an older scratch date, you have preference over a horse that has a newer scratch date. Basically, that just means, and there's a variety of ways this could change, but basically that just means like the horses that haven't run in as long of that haven't run in as recently get priority over the horses that have run more recently. And or horses that have been scratched out of races more recently. So you get penalized for that. But one of the good things about going from Belmont to Saratoga is that all resets because it's a brand new meet. So that was the other reason they entered in that race, is because we could scratch and essentially have no penalty for doing so. So it was like a free look, see if it shows up light and maybe run. But they had kind of pointed to this race on the 31st the whole time, which I think makes sense. I was talking to Christoph about it actually when we scratched on Saturday, or when he told me we were going to scratch on Saturday. It's at 1 3/8 miles, so it's as long as she's ever run before. It's longer than she's ever run before. She's run 1 1/4 miles, and the last race was 1 1/8 miles. And that's probably the big question mark, beyond obviously stepping up in competition, higher level race, Saratoga, things like that. There's a question of whether she'll want to run the 1 3/8 miles. And, basically Christoph just said, we're never going to know until we try it. And I do think, my personal opinion, he obviously would know way more than I do, but my personal opinion, just having, seen the filly, physically, she's a big imposing filly. Like, it seems like she would do better going further. And I thought last year her form was best in 1 1/4 miles races. So when she got to go a little bit further, and her running style, I think, fits those races. And I don't know if you guys watched the gallop out from the last race. I thought she galloped out extremely well, like she wanted to go further, certainly further than the 1 1/8 miles. So That'll be the spot, assuming everything goes well into the race. And again, she has to face tougher horses. It'll probably be a bigger field. And obviously she's won both of her races now at Belmont, so it'll be a track she hasn't won at yet. But to me, the biggest question also will be that distance, but we'll learn and figure it out from there. I think though that answering the distance question could be really interesting for a filly like this, because I've talked to Christoph about it a little bit. And, one of the places he thinks she may like is like a Kentucky Downs, which is a short meet after the Saratoga meet with huge purses. And they run longer, races there typically for really big purses. And, he thinks she would like that kind of track. So, getting to answer kind of the question of like, does she really thrive at the mile and 3/8 will be helpful kind of in making the decision on what to do, after that. In general, like, I think we've got a good opportunity with this filly to have a really fun, campaign moving forward. She does have some residual value from a breeding perspective. So, could make sense to try a stake or something and see if she can't, even if she doesn't win it, if she gets second or third, that increases her value a lot. They were looking and they nominated to a stake actually that was run or is going to be run this weekend at Delaware. Decided not to, based on who else was nominated, decided not to point to that race too quick. And I think it came up pretty tough, but like, I think we'll kind of look for those kinds of races too. Maybe after Saratoga to try to, steal some stakes placing to increase her value. Kind of go from there. I mean, she definitely seems to me, being out of Summerfront and, her breeding on the female side, she seems like a filly that should get better as she gets older. So, I'm just kind of excited to see how she progresses. If she continues to move forward and whatnot, then there's a lot more options, obviously, than if she plateaus. But, we won't know that, I guess, until we see her run the next couple times.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Matt, I wanted to thank you for joining us. It's been already it's been exciting just seeing the filly and seeing her progress and just seeing her win and have all that good stuff. We're going to have an event. I think you and I had discussed it. We're going to have an event, an ERC event on the July 22nd. That's a Friday. I think you're going to be in Del Mar, right? You said you're going to Del Mar for a week.
I am. Yeah, I'm going to go to Del Mar opening week. I've been going out there for like the last 18 to 19 years. So I try to go one week of the meet out there. And the rest of the meet I'm up in Saratoga though. So
Okay.
I'll definitely talk to Brian and Jordan. Hopefully somebody can go over to the event, meet you guys and hang out. And I'm as I just said, I'm up in Saratoga pretty much the whole meet except for that second week. We have a box in the stretch, hang out at the paddock bar a lot. Hopefully you guys can get my contact information and if you want to meet up and say hey and have a drink and enjoy the races, would love to do that. And obviously on the everything goes right, hopefully on the 31st we see everybody in the paddock and have some fun that day too.
Yeah, and it'll be a celebratory. Hopefully it'll be another celebratory drink at the end. Well, thank you very much, Matt. We appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. Seriously, any questions or whatever, or like, you were asking before about registering, Steve, like, if I can be helpful in any way, let me know.
Thank you.
Okay, and if anybody has any additional questions after the fact, you can always just let me know, and then I'll put you in touch with Matt as well to ask him any addition. We could definitely get in touch with him. But thank you, Matt, for joining. And everybody, we do have that event on July 22nd. I definitely will send out an email before to solidify plans. It'll probably be a morning workout kind of thing. That's where we're going to start. We might add another event, maybe a trip out to a farm or something a little bit later in the morning, and then we'll just go to the races. But I'll give you a few more details. And we're also in talks now about doing another aftercare, having another aftercare event in tandem with NIFA towards the end of the meet. So that'll probably be either the last weekend, like the second to last weekend, or the last weekend of August, I would say, or maybe first weekend of September, depending when we can figure it out, when we can get that scheduled. But I'll let you guys know as we get closer to the time. Everybody, I don't know if anybody else has any questions, but thank you for joining, and we'll speak soon.
Take care, guys.
See you. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thanks, everybody.